In fact, this test should be trashed immediately, worldwide, and it should be considered a criminal act for anyone to be sent to quarantine because this test was positive. Now, you have to realize that Germany has been going around testing over 1 million people every week without symptoms. So they're looking at 20,000 false positives that have all been sent to quarantine and labeled COVID-19 cases. That means we're looking at 3,000 cases every day, which is just awful. This is a blatant lie, and it's been done all over the world. The side effects were so large that AstraZeneca had to change the protocol of their trial to give paracetamol at the same time so that the vaccine would be tolerated. Now, this is usually not allowed. You're not allowed to change the protocol of a trial that is ongoing. But it has been done, and it has been accepted by the authorities, which I feel is very, very alarming. I studied medicine in Germany. I graduated in Germany, and then I went into science and also infectious diseases. And I was appointed chair of the Department of Medical Microbiology and Hygiene at the University of Mainz. That was a long time ago, 30 years ago. And I held the chair for 22 years until my retirement in 2012. That was a long time ago. So that's how it is. And I've taught all of medical microbiology. I've taught virology, parasitology for, 30 years? Yes, and immunology. And published in all these disciplines. So that's that. There's no more for me to say. The general consensus is now reached that COVID-19 is approximately equivalent in lethality to seasonal flu. For people under 70, it is in fact less lethal. This is the consensus that has been reached and that the WHO has put on its bulletin of October 2020.
Okay, so understanding that the lethality is the same as seasonal flu, do any of the restrictions of public life make any sense?
No, none at all. In fact, that's why they should be lifted immediately, all of them.
So what did you think when you first heard about a lockdown happening?
The first lockdown or the second lockdown?
The first lockdown. What was your first emotional feeling when you saw they were going to lock down society?
Well, the first emotional feeling was that this was not appropriate, and that's the reason why we stood up and made these videos and asked the Chancellor whether she really had thought through the matter, whether she was sure this was reasonable. But she went on to do it, so let's forget that first time. Now the second time has come, and we are absolutely horrified that no one is doing anything about it. Why doesn't the public stand up and say, no, how come we're letting the politicians do the same mistake again without any reason? The fact is that during the last wave of this epidemic, in Europe and also in America and Canada, if you looked at the number of people who died, people under 70, what was the lethality rate for people under 70 who had been infected by the virus? The simple answer is it was less than 0.1%, meaning that 99.9, probably 99.95% of the infected individuals did not die. Even the ones who had, these include those with pre-existing illnesses. Now, in any flu season, the number of people who will die because of the flu is above 0.05%. So, for people under 70, this is definitely not even as dangerous as the seasonal flu.
So, and does the development of a vaccine for COVID-19 make sense?
Well, of course not. I mean, if your chances of dying is about 0.05, this is a very small number, 0.05, this means that if you want to develop a vaccine and it's going to be proven efficacious, you have to show that the lethality rate goes down further than 0.05 to 0.03 or 0.02. But that will never be possible. No clinical trial in the world will be able to show that difference, because that difference is so minuscule. It's not like tetanus. If you get tetanus today, 100 people get tetanus, 90 are going to die, all right? In Thailand, 100 are going to die. If you're vaccinated against tetanus, no one's going to die. So that is really efficaciousness. And that's what you have to go for when you develop a vaccine. So in fact, this vaccine development for people under 70 is absolutely nonsensical. The only sense a vaccine might have would be for people over 70, over 75, who are really endangered. And of these, only those with pre-existing illnesses are really endangered. If you are 80 or 90 today and you are healthy, the chances of your dying because of COVID-19 are virtually as small as if you were 70. Now, I can tell you that I am way over 70, and I know that this virus is not going to kill me. It can't, in fact. So there you are. If you want to develop a vaccine, it is only for those over 70 with pre-existing illnesses. Now, if you have a vaccine that works for these, fine, get vaccinated. But I tell you, to develop a vaccine for this population, it is so goddamn difficult. You have to be very, very careful that that vaccine is not killing the elderly with pre-existing disease instead of protecting them. And the thing is that what holds for COVID-19 or Sars-kovtwo holds for virtually all other respiratory pathogens. So many viruses, the flu virus, the RSV virus, and bacteria like pneumococci that are so much more, you get 100 times more pneumococcal infections than SARS-CoV-2. And they are all deadly to people with pre-existing disease. So if you go making a vaccine for this one virus, it's out of proportion, you see, because you're not going to be saving lives to any significant extent. If someone is over 75 and has serious pre-existing illness, then, things are coming to an end. That's a fact. And we should see to it that people do not enter the terminal stage of their lives at 75 or even 80, because, as you hopefully know, your genome is giving you 100 years. So if you are endangered because, we have not been giving you, we as doctors have not been giving you the right advice on how to lead a healthy life. And that, I think, is the major task that we have. It's not our task to go around trying to create a vaccine after having let you make yourself ill for decades by eating too much, sorry to say this, smoking, drinking, too much stress. This sort of thing is what people in the public health branch should be doing. Telling people how to live healthily so that the coronavirus will mean nothing to you, even if you get ill when you're 80.
Do you believe a COVID vaccine would be able to overcome the regulations on efficacy?
The COVID vaccine can't. It would be the politicians and the lawmakers who would overcome this regulation, and that would be actually criminal. To show statistical relevance in humans, how many humans would you have to look at? If you are looking at, let's say, 1 in 1,000 who will die, then you're looking at 1,000 in 1,000,000 that might die, or only 500 in 1,000,000 actually. So let's say you have 1,000,000 that are vaccinated and 1,000,000 who are not vaccinated, and you let those 1,000,000 become infected. But where are you going to get those infections from? You don't have all those infections, in the 1,000,000 that have been tested in the same populace. So it can't be done. And even if you look at that, then you have to see whether of these 1,000,000, significantly less than 500 die. And to get statistical significance out in 1,000,000, 500 in 1,000,000, I think is virtually impossible. So in the end, even if you tested 1,000,000 against 1,000,000 placebo, you wouldn't get an answer. So in fact, it's hopeless. It's a hopeless situation. People were hoping to test these vaccines in monkeys. And so these experiments were done actually. And I think to the dismay of the people doing the experiments, they found out that the monkeys were like humans. They wouldn't get ill. they wouldn't get ill. So the only thing they could show was that monkeys were seemingly protected to a certain extent, not really very well, against the infection per se, which means nothing. Because we are all protected anyway, because our immune system realizes that this virus is, in contrast to what you've been told, not new. It's now known that your lymphocytes recognize parts of this virus because these parts, let's say a button or whatever, are the same as parts of coronaviruses of olden days, of last year and the years before. So this is a fact, and this fact is probably the explanation why, if you are under 70 without any pre-existing illness, it doesn't mean that you can't get the virus, but it means that you're not going to die, because this virus is just, a descendant of the viruses of old. It's like, when you have a child, a newborn comes onto the world, and he's different from you and from the others, but he's still a human being. So this coronavirus is also a coronavirus, and your immune system is smarter than the politicians who are telling you that it's a new virus, because the immune system is telling you, no, our lymphocytes recognize this. So don't worry. We'll take care of you.
What percentage of the COVID deaths are from other conditions?
Well, this is very difficult to assess because if you don't have the records to look at, you can't say. But the estimates, the official estimates in America are over 90% are due to pre-existing illnesses. And the estimates from the data I oversee would be the same in Germany. But I have no hard data. So this would be an estimate, 90%.
How accurate are the PCR tests that are being deployed?
The PCR tests are totally inaccurate because they're being conducted in a non-standardized manner.
We're seeing a glut of tests and quote-unquote cases all the time, and so how accurate do you believe these PCR tests are, and are they appropriate for diagnostic purposes?
Are the PCR tests appropriate for diagnostic purposes? Certainly not. You know, the PCR method developed by Mullis, who got the Nobel Prize for this, he himself said, do not use this test for diagnosis. And in fact, neither was it developed for diagnosis, nor has it ever been approved for diagnosis. At best, this test may be used to support the diagnosis, the clinical diagnosis, meaning that you should not be using this test on people without symptoms, as it's being done right now. This is abuse of a test. Why? Because the test is far, far too sensitive.
So you're saying the tests lab to lab have different criteria?
Completely different. Completely different. And because they're completely different, they're also highly vulnerable to error, prone to error. You know, last week, 60 people were sent to quarantine in Bavaria, in a town, and they decided to demand that the test was repeated because they didn't believe it. And the test was repeated, and it turned out that 58 were negative. And the last two were also only positive because the test had been rigged so that it was so sensitive. But the other 58 were totally negative, meaning that the test itself was faulty. So there you are. In fact, this test should be trashed immediately, worldwide. And it should be considered a criminal act for anyone to be sent to quarantine because this test was positive.
So, yeah, I guess people are being terrorized by these tests, and then we're being told cases, when in fact there could be nothing going on at all, right?
Mainly there's nothing going on at all. You know, the thing is that no one stands up to say, why don't people find out? You know, if I'm healthy and I'm tested positive, and I think yesterday, I don't know the numbers, 10,000 Germans were tested positive who had no symptoms. Actually, what should be done, what must be done, is that the authorities go and find out what happens to these 10,000 people in the next 2 weeks. Is anyone going to fall ill at all? And if this is done, they will find out that no one has been ill, falls ill, and that will be the end of the testing, because it means that the tests say nothing, because it's known that if you're not ill, you will never spread the disease COVID-19, which is the pneumonia, to anyone. There's no documented case in the world where it has been shown that a severely diseased individual with COVID-19 pneumonia contacted this from a non-symptomatic individual. Not a single case in the world. So it's absolutely senseless to go on testing people like this.
So we've been told there's these asymptomatic carriers, and that children can be these super spreaders and all this. Is that accurate at all?
It is complete nonsense. It's never been shown. It's a claim. It's a claim that has been spread as a fact. And this I consider criminal. The idea of asymptomatic carrier spreading the disease COVID-19, which is the pneumonia, not a cough, but the pneumonia COVID-19, is untrue. And it is backed by zero data. There is not a single case in the world documented. So, in fact, the whole business is a fake.
And that's what's the basis of the masks, of a lot of these measures, isn't it?
Yes, this is the inhuman part of it, forcing people to wear masks because of no reason, taking away their rights as humans without reason. I tell the people in Germany, there's a German animal protection law that will put you to prison if you harm an animal or endanger the health of an animal without reason. But now the Germans are allowing their own children to be harassed, to be mistreated, forced to wear masks, which is known to damage their health, without reason. So here in Germany, and I'm afraid to say in America and everywhere in the world, humans have fewer rights than animals. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. So what is your analysis of gene-based vaccines?
I don't have an analysis of gene-based vaccines, but I have an apprehension that these gene-based vaccines are horribly dangerous. Because, you know, gene-based vaccines have never been used on humans before. So what we're witnessing now are human experiments on humans. The amazing part, the amazing point, and this rests on the last thing that I just said, is that, you know, if you want to do animal experiments in Germany and in the US or anywhere in the world, you have to file an application for this. You have to put the whole case on paper, pages and pages explaining why you want to do these experiments on animals. And then you have a committee who goes through every word in that application. And in the end, they will say yes or no. Now, what are we seeing here? Experiments on thousands and thousands of humans in the world that have not gone through any examination of whether they may be dangerous to you. You know, if you put a foreign gene in your body, and that's what's being done in these gene-based experiments, you're putting a virus gene into your body, into your muscle. This gene is being taken up by your cells, and your cells are becoming the factory to make the virus protein. That's what's happening in your whole body, in cells that have never been identified. We don't know where this is taking place. For sure it's taking place in the lymph nodes, in cells that are in the lymph nodes. And what is a basic biological law in immunology is that if a cell makes a foreign protein, or even if a cell makes a protein, a virus protein, then during the production of this virus protein, there is going to be fallout. So there's going to be a piece of the protein, a piece of this pullover, the pullover is the protein, that falls down as waste and production waste and is not used. And this waste is put in front of the door and recognized by your immune system. And your immune system, your killer lymphocytes, see this waste and will then come and attack your cell and try to kill your cell, because it realizes that your cell is doing something that it should not be doing. It's producing a virus protein. Okay? Now, this is going to be the case if you have lymphocytes that recognize this waste of the coronavirus. And I believe that when people started thinking about these gene-based vaccines for use in humans, they didn't think of the possibility that you, the vaccinee, the one getting the vaccine, would already have killer lymphocytes that recognize this waste, because they thought this virus was new, you see. And after the vaccine started to enter the third trial, which is clinical trial phase 3, on hundreds and on thousands of people, then the discovery was made by immunologists that these killer lymphocytes were present, obviously because these waste products were similar to the waste products of the viruses the year before. And that's what immediately set us off thinking and said, oh my God, if those killer lymphocytes are already in your body awakened. They'll be awoken to life when these products appear again. And, you know, I taught immunology for 30 years. There can be no way that these killer lymphocytes do not attack your cells. There is no way. They were created by God to do this, and they will continue doing this.
So are you saying that basically the gene-based vaccines could create kind of a lethal autoimmune disease?
I think, indeed, autoimmune disease can be triggered by these gene-based vaccines. And, you know, all these gene-based vaccines have rather severe side effects. They are grade 3, meaning that you get a swollen arm, pain, redness, swelling, fever, headaches, joint aches, muscle aches. The side effects were so large that AstraZeneca had to change the protocol of their trial to give paracetamol at the same time so that the vaccine would be tolerated. Now, this is usually not allowed. You're not allowed to change the protocol of a trial that is ongoing. But it has been done, and it has been accepted by the authorities, which I feel is very, very alarming.
There's an emphasis on looking at antibody immunity. Could you explain T-cell immunity, lymphocytes, briefly to the audience?
T-cell immunity, lymphocytes, immunity based on T-cells. Yes, well, I'll try to explain this. Everyone thinks that the immunity against a virus like the coronavirus depends solely on antibodies. Antibodies are proteins of yours that will catch on to the virus and prevent the virus entering the cell. All right. Now, this may work if you have enough antibodies directed against the right part of the virus, if there are not too many viruses. But one antibody that is bound to a virus is not available to bind to any other virus. So if a second virus comes, you won't have any antibody left, and that virus will just bind and go into your cell. This is simple. So the very belief that by stimulating production of these antibodies, you're going to be immune to the virus is very naive. And in fact, it isn't correct. You have to also define the dose and the level of the antibody that you have, and this is not possible to do by any normal testing. All right. You will, especially since the antibody production is, after it comes, it wanes, it goes down just after a few months. So if you vaccinate now, the antibody will go up, and after 2 or 3 months, you won't have enough of it. So, no way. Now, the immune system knows what to do then, because after the virus enters your cell, it gets multiplied, and it comes out and infects the next cell. As I told you before, when a virus is being produced in a cell, the cell puts the waste products of the virus in front of the door, and killer lymphocytes will then patrol by and see that the cell is infected. And it is the job of your lymphocytes to kill your own cells. That is the job that your lymphocytes have. So if you're going to be asked after this interview about what do your killer lymphocytes kill, you will belong to the select few lay people in the world who know that killer lymphocytes have been created by God in your country to kill virus-infected cells and to kill tumor cells. Those are the two targets for your killer viruses, killer lymphocytes. The killer lymphocytes do not kill bacteria, can't kill parasites. They can only kill their own cells, okay? Now, that is why if you are if you do get the disease, if you do start to cough, if you do start to get fever and you do have pneumonia, you've fallen ill because the virus has entered your cell, has been produced and has spread within the lung to the next cells, but you get well again. You get well even if you don't take antivirals, because there are really no effective and antivirals against this virus, and actually you don't need it, because your killer lymphocytes are going to come and kill those cells that are producing the virus, and it doesn't matter, because those cells that have been killed stop producing the virus, then the healthy cells proliferate and the wound is healed in your lungs, okay? And the virus is gone. And then you get up, fever goes away, and you go to work again. It's that simple.
Is it the duty of vaccine manufacturers to test the negative effects of the products?
Of course, it is the duty of the manufacturers to see whether any side effects might ensue from autoimmune processes triggered by the vaccine. And this has never been done. They did not do the work. All right?
And have the events of this year affected your view of the world?
Oh, definitely. It has disillusioned us, my wife and myself, and we are frightened that the public, the people around us, don't realize that they are being led to their downfall, led to their doom as human beings, because they are losing their rights that they have as humans. We are losing our rights.
Could you comment on some of the problems of all the numbers that are being thrown at us every day in the press?
Well, the major problem is that the PCR test, whenever it's positive, and I told you before that this test is worthless because it's positive, falsely positive to a tremendous extent if you go around testing normal and healthy people. It should be prohibited. So the great, it's treacherous. The treachery is that a normal person with a positive PCR test is graded as a COVID-19 case, which means that he's graded as a seriously ill individual. And he enters the records as such. And this must be stopped, because it inflates the numbers to an unbearable extent and to an unethical extent. That's what's happening today.
Could you comment on how the numbers of cases, quote-unquote cases, are never put in terms of a statistical sample? They're just thrown out there in the air. Could you maybe comment on the need to put them in relationship to the size of the sample you're looking at? Otherwise it's meaningless.
The size of the sample and the ratio of positive tests must be given. Otherwise the numbers are absolutely worthless. You see, if this test has a rate of false positives of, let's say, 2%, which is a fact, they have a rate of false positives of at least 2%, especially now in the winter season, where other coronaviruses and flu viruses are underway, and this test will pick them up too, because the test is so sensitive that it will mistake a flu virus or another coronavirus for the COVID-19 virus. Imagine you test 1,000 people and 2%, that's 20, are tested false positive. That means they don't have the COVID-19 virus, but they are taken as positives. Test 1,000 people, you get 20. If you test 1 million people, if you test, 1 million, what you have then, 20,000, right? 20,000 false positive. 20,000. Now you have to realize that Germany has been going around testing over 1 million people every week without symptoms. So they're looking at 20,000 false positives that have all been sent to quarantine and labeled COVID-19 cases. That means we're looking at 3,000 cases every day, which is just awful. This is a blatant lie, and it's been done all over the world. You've got to stop this.
And have we ever seen in history the quarantining of healthy people?
Never. This is the first time, and we're quarantining tens of thousands of people. You know, it's so unbelievable and so frightening that everyone just takes this lying down and saying, well, it's necessary because we want to prevent the endangered population, which is absolutely not true. You're not preventing anything. Look, the endangered people are the elderly next room who also really need to be protected. But you don't go around protecting them by forcing your children here in this room to wear your masks or by wearing your mask yourself. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't see why and how anyone can believe this.
And as far as the death statistics, could you comment on the issue of death by and death with?
Well, as I said before, death by and death with corona is an issue that is global. So no country is able to officially state how many, because no one has done any real counting. But in America, I think it was the CDC that actually released this number that 6% max have died because of the virus. So you just divide those numbers that are presented to you by the press by a factor of 10, and then you're down to earth. And when you do this, in Germany, for instance, you come to a number that starts to be absolutely ridiculous, because instead of 10,000 deaths, you're looking at 1,000 deaths over a period of months, all right? Now, 1,000 deaths, let's say over a period of 100 days. I'm bringing you to, 10 deaths a day, 10 deaths a day. You have to realize that in Germany, 2,500 people are dying every day. Of these, 10 have been dying because of COVID-19. But of these 2,500, 1,000 are dying because of heart attack. Another 800 are dying because of cancer. Another, and at least 50 are dying because of pneumococcal pneumonia. 5 times more than COVID. So what's the big deal about all of this? I just say what I said 7 months ago, forget it and let's get back to normal life again. Just forget everything. This virus is not the big killer virus that you think it is. And you should stop believing. Start thinking and stop believing.
The lockdowns came after the peak was already over.
Well, the lockdown came when the peak was already over, yes. But the lockdowns would never have done anything anyway, because, as I told you, the virus epidemic was over before the lockdown came. And even without the lockdown, this virus was no more dangerous than a normal flu virus. So since the lockdown would also not have done anything to the flu, why think about a lockdown anyway? It's all absolute nonsense. This is actually probably the last thing I want to say about the whole matter. Why don't we just get back to normal life and stop wasting time, energy, and stop destroying lives and existence in this absolutely suicidal manner?
And is there any scientific basis for immune status certificates?
Is there any scientific stand for immune? Well,
immunity passports.
Immunity passports, if they ever come to be, then it's good night to society, good night to science, and good night to humanity.
That's powerful, yeah. And it would be likely they would be based on antibodies, wouldn't it?
There will be no other way other than to measure antibodies for this, because you can't measure T cell activity, and I don't think you want to measure them because it's so senseless. It's already been shown that virtually everyone has T cell activity against this virus, so you don't have to go around testing anymore.
And so as Gupta has said, and Inaccuracy have said that we're likely dealing with the fact that 80% or more people are already immune to this, right?
Well, the data are that approximately 80% of the lymphocyte, 80% of those people whose lymphocytes, blood lymphocytes, have been tested for activity, have activity against this virus. So, if there are 100 donors, 80 of those donors had lymphocytes in their blood that reacted with this virus. What it means, we don't know, but it's very probable that it means that they are actually at least partially immune to the virus. But what you have to realize is that only about far less than 10% of your lymphocytes are in the blood at any time the blood is taken. Over 90% reside in the lymph nodes, in the spleen, in the liver, and they are not drawn in the blood. So I'm willing to bet that those who tested negative did have lymphocytes that would have tested positive, only they were at that time when the blood was drawn, just didn't happen to be in the blood. They happened to be in the spleen or lymph nodes, but they would have been in the blood maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow. So in fact the answer is, I'm convinced that we are all, we have a background immunity against this virus. This is what I claim is the case. I don't know whether I'm right, but I think there's a high probability that I am right.
And the last question is, you came here, you migrated to Germany from Thailand for a more, I guess, free life. And how have the events of this year made you look at everything?
Well, how have the events of this year turned my mind around? I came in search of freedom. My country has never been democratic. Has no academia. So I came here and I found what I was looking for, and I was a very, very happy person. But now, within 7 months, I find myself and my family imprisoned. And it is the nightmare that I never thought I would have to go through. And my only thought is how to get out of this nightmare to save the lives of my children and grandchildren. Humans have never been in anything of these dimensions today. Totalitarian state, with the difference that there are possibilities of controlling you that have never been there before. And this control over the individual, if this is allowed to happen, it would be the end of the human individual. What do you think?
In communism before, they didn't have the kind of technical, it was expensive to send guys to watch you and stuff. Now it's all digital. So
yeah,
the likelihood of total surveillance and total
surveillance,
total control,
and total control
is
so
way more present. You know? Yeah.
This whole nightmare reminds me of The Time Machine, H.G. Wells. You know The Time Machine?
Mm-hmm.
By this guy.
You feel like you're in a time machine?
Yeah, and getting out in the future, where the tame sheep of the world were allowed to graze on the meadows, and the elite controlled them, and they were the Morlocks, and they were under the surface and only came out in the night to choose the choicest sheep for their meals. A time machine. That was the horror vision of H.G. Wells 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Mm.